Hello, and welcome back to the podcast that must not be named. I am Luke.
I am Melissa.
And we are here discussing Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Book 4, Chapter 2, The Scar. This episode is covering a chapter that is 10 pages long, and that is 1.36% of the book.
Chapter 2, The Lightning Bolt. Harry wakes up suddenly with his scar burning hotly on his forehead. He remembers that the last time this had happened, Voldemort was nearby. He jumps out of bed and realizes that Voldemort is not around and can't be. He then tries to remember a dream he just had about Voldemort talking to somebody about murder and a plot. He realizes he can't tell his family because they wouldn't care. He can't tell his best friends because Hermione would overreact and Ron would think nothing of it. He decides the only person he wants to know is his godfather, Sirius Black. The same godfather who was accused of killing 13 people after selling Harry's parents out to Voldemort. However, Harry learned last year Sirius was not the traitor, but Wormtail had been the one to tell James and Lily's secret, causing their untimely death. And Harry then helped Sirius escape the Dementors on a stolen hippogriff named Buckbeak. Harry sits down and writes a letter to his godfather telling him about the goings-on with the Dursleys and wondering if he knew of any scars hurting long after they've healed. Hedwig is out hunting, so Harry will send it later, but gets dressed and heads downstairs for breakfast.
So this is typically the point of the show where we talk about all the new characters that we were introduced to. And while we were introduced to a large amount of characters,
We knew all of them.
none of them were new.
Yeah, not a single new character.
Nope. And guess what else was not new?
Locations, right?
We went nowhere new.
We went nowhere. Didn't even hear about anywhere new. I don't know. There are times where like that's like disappointing to me.
I mean, it's chapter 2 though. Like, give it a minute. And chapter 1 was entirely new.
It's true. That is
So
true.
is it like compensating for something?
I guess so. We did have a few magicabulary, I noticed. I'm
going to give you one of them. The other one's grades of salt, people.
Well, one of them, yeah. Okay, so we did have some magicabulary here. Melissa might fight me on a couple of these, but we have Common Magical Ailments and Afflictions, a book that was referenced twice, actually.
I will not fight you on that one. I believe that is as per our magicabulary definition, a J.K. Rowling invented vocabulary and or book title that she came up with that applies to the wizarding world.
There have been a few of these that are mainly just specific nouns, sometimes proper nouns. Correction, I said plural nouns on something a couple chapters ago, and I sounded like an idiot, but I know what a proper noun is. Apologies for that. The PlayStation was referenced here, and the game Mega Mutilator Part 3.
First of all, a PlayStation is not a wizarding noun. I don't have another word for it. It's not a wizarding item, and it was not invented by J.K. Rowling. So I agree with you that it is a new mention, not a magicabulary.
Okay. Do you have problems with the other one?
I feel like I should have looked up if this was a real game.
It is not a real game. As far as I know, I don't think it is.
Let me do a quick Mutilator Part 3.
It's a title that seems so,
Excuse me, you said it wrong. It's Mega Mutilation Part 3 first. And no, I do not believe it is a real game.
It's one of those comically, clearly made up,
yes,
ripping on video games type titles. That's why
yes.
I was pretty confident it was not a real title.
It is not. The only thing that happens when you Google search it is Harry Potter stuff pulls up.
All right. I will unpack more of my PlayStation discussion later.
Awesome.
Let's talk about the illustration.
I had a comment.
Go for it.
Harry using his, looking like holding a scar with his left hand.
Mm-hmm.
As we record this on National Left-Handers Day, I'm going to give a left-handed high five, being a left-handed person myself. But I do not appreciate that Harry is once again portrayed being left-handed because we still know that he is right-handed from book 1.
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate on this just to try to help figure this out. stories from Harry's perspective. All of these are in a mirror to him.
No, because it would still be his left hand.
But the image of it that we see from his eyes, it would be reversed. It would be flipped.
That's way too confusing.
It's not. That's the only thing that could possibly make sense. As opposed to, he can also just rub his scar when it hurts with his left hand. People do things with both hands, Melissa. You're the only person that only uses one hand.
That's not true.
But has
I
two.
use two hands. I use two hands. I can type with two hands.
I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't, but I could. No,
I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't either. But this is now the third illustration in a row since book 3 that he is using his left hand and not his right hand. We have yet to see an illustration in the last 2 books of him using his dominant hand.
Okay. Hey, Melissa, I see you have literally 0 notes here.
Let's see. My thoughts are, and then with a little bit of
Dot, dot, dot. I have to put a little noise in there because when I truncate silence later, that will
Right.
just be, and then,
and then and then with a little more.
Yeah, so
Well,
I think it's pretty clear that this chapter is a blatant exposition. Pretty rough.
in my defense, I did have a few topics I wanted to talk about, but seeing as how it was my chapter to come up with questions and I only could come up with 4
Yeah.
and had to rely on you for more, I threw the notes right out the window and said, I'm good.
All right. Yeah. No, this is like I think a first. There have been times where I haven't had notes, and we've riffed off yours. But yeah, I actually had a lot more thoughts on this chapter than I expected because I read through it real quick early today, and then when I went and sat down and did my notes, there were more things that caught my attention that I wanted to kind of pick apart a little bit. So
You go for it, man.
we find out that Harry's scars starts hurting again for the first time since book 1. Right? I mean,
Did you double check that book 1 thing?
They
I
mention
agree
it.
with you.
They mention it there that since he was close is what they said. Since Voldemort was close, I'm assuming that means book 1. I don't remember it hurting in book 2, with the diary around or
Yeah, does Force Ghost
with the
Riddle.
basilisk. Yeah, I don't think it does. So I feel like it's just the Quirrell scar in interactions and the Man with Two Faces chapter. But I find that very interesting. That hey, he just had this really weird dream. You know, he seems to have witnessed the events at the Riddle House that we just saw last chapter, which was a bizarre chapter for us to see anyway.
Right.
So, like, something weird's going on, right? It really feels like it.
Yes, I agree with you. I don't know what perspective Harry may have witnessed that chapter 1 event.
Mhm.
I kind of think it might be from the perspective of Frank Bryce.
Like what
That's
we
kind of
saw,
what it feels like.
almost.
Right, like through his eyes.
Not the
kind of a thing.
historical perspective on Frank, but like in the room perspective
Yes.
of Frank, because there was a kind of a shift in there a bit.
So, I mean, that's a little weird that he's got like a mind meld with some random muggle.
Yeah, and just the whole thing is odd, you know, and the fact that his scar starts hurting right now, and it clearly is bothering him. That's kind of the only real plot thing that happens in this chapter is his scar hurt, and he has to try to figure out who should know about it. Like, that's what kind of kicks everything off.
I have a thought.
Okay, hey, go
Finally,
for it. There we
because I
go.
didn't have any before. Do you think that this is the first night Tom Riddle's / Voldemort has been back in England? Because it sounds like they just got to the Riddle House, and this is maybe like their big stop.
So I think the first question that we have to ask is what we saw in chapter 1, the Riddle House. Harry sees that in a dream. Does he see it live? You know, is he seeing it like actually in time as it's happening while he's asleep? I think
so.
Okay, so it's not just something that he's getting this, I don't know, weird transposed memory thing at time delayed.
No, because at the end of chapter 1, like
and it says a boy wakes up miles and miles away.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
200 miles away, the boy called Harry Potter woke with a start, like immediately as Frank Bryce was murdered. So, yeah, no, I believe that it's a concurrent event.
I think that's fair to say that he saw that Harry experienced it live from the portion of the episode that was the portion of that chapter that was in current time.
Yes.
So what was the question?
Is this the first?
So did they just get back tonight?
Evening, yes.
Into England? I think so. I mean, it would make sense to me that this is the first time since book 1 that he's been back anywhere near, you know, at least on the same island.
Although, let me just have a little bit of an eye roll at the fact that here's Harry having scar pain at Voldy's closeness of 200 miles. But in year one, like, totally hung out in the same classroom and it was not an issue.
Yeah, that's
questionable.
Well, there could
I don't want to dwell on it because I'm sure it goes back to plot point not thought of. But
well, I mean, I think the thing that hurts his scar is when he kills Frank Bryce. You know, I think there could be a connection that he didn't kill anybody during book one necessarily.
Like he's not in class just picking off students.
Bing, bing. See you, Seamus. Like, no, I just don't think. I mean, I know that didn't happen, but I feel like we would have heard about that.
All right, that makes me feel better. I mean, not really, because Frank Bryce is dead. Oh,
yeah, good character, Frank.
Right,
he had a hard war, Frank.
Oh, Frank.
So the other thing that really caught my attention was Harry had been a year old the night Voldemort, the most powerful dark wizard for a century, a wizard who had been gaining power steadily for 11 years. ... This is the first kind of delineation of how long Voldemort had been kind of rising to power before he fell on what should have been become known as Harry Potter Day.
I'm grabbing pens. I need to map out some timelines. Okay, so Harry Potter was born in 1980, correct?
Correct.
Because he's a year younger than me.
Yes.
If that makes sense. Yes. Which means his parents died in 1981.
Yes.
And
October
if Voldemort...
31st. Yep. So 1970 is the year that, according to this line, Voldemort starts gaining power steadily, is what it says.
And we know from book 2 that 50 years prior to Harry Potter's second year, so
92, right?
92 into 93, right? The school year of 92 and 93. That's when Chamber of Secrets happened. So 50 years prior to that. So 1943
yep.
was
when the chamber was open and Moaning Myrtle died.
The Riddle Chamber and Hagrid was whatever.
Yes.
Which means that, and what did they say he was? 16 at that time? So let's give him 2 more years to graduate. You think? 6 year, 1 more year? Maybe he graduated from Hogwarts in 1944, 1945?
Sure.
Somewhere in there?
So between 45 and 70?
25 years unaccounted for?
At this point, yeah. That's okay. I mean, this is the first information that we've had like this at all. So
I am curious about those gap years.
So how old would he have been in 1970 when he first started gaining powers?
So 27 years after he was 16, 43.
Okay, that could be prime time, you know,
easily. So here's what I'm hearing. I have 4 years before I start my rise to power.
There you go. You know, you've just been setting the groundwork. You have 25 unaccounted years right now that you could be taking advantage of.
So, like, do you feel like, I mean, 25 years is a long time. Could he have had, like, a family and had some kids and raised them and sent them off and said, okay, now I can take over the world?
You know, I've got my progeny out there. I've got my line, you know, rooted somewhere in Bulgaria or, you know, Albania, I meant, the forests, right? You know, that's maybe.
He got a job working like
a 24-year-old kid out there.
Right.
Know?
He had to pay off some student loans.
I like this.
He got a job. He was like, you know, entry-level mailroom kind of job.
Yeah.
Worked his way up and like retired early and said, okay.
He made a couple of good moves in the stock market.
Usually, probably
post World War II, obviously.
Yeah,
so
obviously
he made some moves in the American stock market, and was independently wealthy and could just kind of.
My guess is he probably invested in
IBM. It's got to be
possibly, but also in like, I mean, it's Voldemort, right? So you know he's probably got his fingers in like the Cold War, you know, spreading like the hate and the dissension between America and USSR.
Okay, yeah,
maybe he invented like the what were the air raid sirens?
Okay, yeah, it's funny that you said Cold War because I was actually thinking of cryogenically frozen, like the freezing technology that Walt Disney has, you know, did and all that. It was just funny that you said Cold War, right? When I was thinking cryogenically freezing. So
and then Woodstock happened, and he said, "I'm good. Time to come out."
That's not for me. I'm going back to the wizard sector,
or
the wizard sector. Yeah, the public sector, the private sector, and
1969. That's when the first guy walks on the moon. Voldemort's like, awesome, I'm going to do that. But first I got to take over the world.
Right.
That's training to be an astronaut. I'm 43. I'm too old.
Yeah. I mean, he's got to basically take over so that he can rewrite the rules so he can, join either the astronaut or cosmonaut, training program at his age.
The UK didn't do it as much.
Yeah.
But they were still rebuilding.
Mm-hmm. No, I think we figured it out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay,
John
all my
F.
writer
Kennedy
friends.
sent Tom Riddle. He sent men to the moon, within the decade, and he sent Tom Riddle to take over the wizarding world.
It's the little things, folks.
And we thought we'd had trouble with this chapter.
All of a sudden, I'm invested. I pulled out my pens and my graph paper and everything.
All right, we got anything else on that? I just thought that was
I had nothing.
again. We're always looking for numbers, and that's what the math teacher and the engineer are here for, folks.
With our graph paper.
Yeah. But yeah, someone, if you want to go through and maybe write those fanfics as well as anybody else can, we would love to read them.
Even just an outline to start.
Okay, we can build on it together. Yeah.
We'll throw out ideas. I don't write, but I'm happy to spew ideas, and then you make it sound good.
We bring writers on, like the new blog that we have on our website. Check it out.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, very cool. From Gretcha Sketcha. Check her out. Cool stuff. But my next thought here for this chapter, for Goblet of Fire, chapter 2, is Harry's imagined reactions of Ron and Hermione seem spot on, don't they? Like, where he's just like, that seems pretty weird. Like, it's probably not a big deal, but I'll talk to my dad. And hers, where it's like, I'm gonna let's pull any reference that we have.
You need to tell Dumbledore, but at the same time, I'm gonna look it up in a book.
Right. It's just, he's got them down pat, I think.
Okay.
My final note here before we get on to some fun burning questions.
I feel like I have to get prepared for this one because I've been waiting for this conversation for 15 years.
Sony PlayStation is referenced. Well, it does just say PlayStation. It doesn't specifically say Sony PlayStation, but
One can assume.
We'll make the assumption that in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, it's the same Sony PlayStation. This chapter occurs in the summer of 1994. The PlayStation did not come out in Japan, which is where it was created by Sony, until December of 1994. It came out in the US and the United States in September the following year, 1995.
The US and the United States are the same country.
The United Kingdom and the United States is what I meant.
Better. Until 1995.
Until September 1995.
Which is a full 14 months, 13 months after this chapter was written.
Yes.
Just checking.
So this was something that people jumped on like right away. Yeah.
And,
And JK flat out said, I forget the quote that it says, but she's like, I don't do PlayStations. I can't even turn them on. Like that. She had like a quote. She's like that. I just threw it in there for, whatever pop culture reference, and people jumped on it. But let's try to make this work. And there are theories on how it can possibly still be accurate.
Go for it.
So one simple one is just because it was released to the public in 1994, there weren't developer prototypes out there that were sent to people, and we know how connected the Dursleys are trying to be. They could have made a good friend with their Japanese golfer jokes, and gotten their hands on a developer prototype PlayStation.
You mean the Japanese golfer joke might have actually been a true story?
Very possibly. So
okay.
That's one route that it could take, to be true. I think that's somewhat fair. Bringing the Japanese golfer joke into it, that was my own addition. I think that's really what sells that idea. But the other kind of
idea. It's not as funny if you give yourself credit.
I know. I'll cut that. But
don't, because then they miss me laughing at you for it. Go on.
The other way you can look at this is we don't 100% know that Harry's Wizarding World timeline is the exact same as ours. I mean, we don't really have any current event timelines that correlate one to the other, and you can get into all sorts of different things. Maybe he got a time turner, and jumped ahead a couple months and then got it and went back. There's a lot of possibilities there. But it's just worth noting it was not out for where they lived for another year and a half or so.
She was just wrong. Be there in your wrongness. Stand there in your wrongness and just be wrong.
Cube of shame. No. And she's never tried to justify that it was just, well, that's what was there. And okay, let's move on with our lives.
She should have said Atari.
Or NES, which, that's the problem with her writing this book, 7 years after the fact, and not necessarily...
And not trying to be historically accurate.
Not having Google and Wikipedia to fact check it so easily.
Also true.
Just be like, okay, can't use that
Sounds
one.
Good.
Can't use that one. Let's go with Sega Saturn instead. That would have been new. All right, that's all I've got. Melissa, you got any burning questions for me?
I have some. They're a little warm and toasty. I don't know if they're full on burning, but we'll try.
All right, well, let's roast them.
Okay, so question 1 is a multi-parter. Harry responds to, or thinks about his friend's responses to his scar hurting, right? He tells us what Hermione would say. He tells what Ron would say. I want to know, how do you think McGonagall would react to hearing about Harry's scar hurting?
So I think the, first blush answer is, McGonagall's pretty stern. Seems like she's pretty tough. Like she would play it tough, but we've seen her compassionate side, especially for, Harry. She's kind of got a soft spot for him. I don't know. I feel like she would listen to him, but might not take it all that seriously because one, she's never heard this information before at all. So it'd be new and she would need some kind of proof or things like that because she's very logical. Or two, she would just support him and be like, this is above my pay grade. Talk to Dumbledore.
Or she'd freak out and be like, that sounds really bad.
Right, that's the...
Talk to Dumbledore.
Let me elevate this. That's like this is out of my hands, Potter.
Yep. All right. Part 2 of this question. How would Draco Malfoy respond?
Oh, he'd laugh at him, right? I mean, this is Dementors all over again. I mean...
Classic Harry Potter.
Right? It's like, oh, attention seeking, oh, get over yourself. You think wuss, sissy, Nancy, whatever you would want to call them.
Right. All right, last person. How would Lockhart respond?
Let's see. I feel like Lockhart would definitely take the night bus right over to Privet Drive and try to solve the issue single-handedly, in person. He would take the bull by the horns and figure it out.
And then Harry would be dead. No more book.
He wouldn't have a scar anymore, because he would probably blast it off his face or something. Or he would just memory charm him and be like, oh, remember that pain? No, you don't. No pain.
God, you're welcome.
See, that solves it, right? If he forgets how to feel pain.
I'm just thinking back to my teaching strategy, right? Like, you don't always have to use the most efficient strategy as long as the strategy works to solve the problem. Technically, it does the job.
Technically correct is the best kind of correct.
All right, question number 2. The one person we didn't talk about when it came to talking about Harry's scar and who to talk to was Dumbledore. Because he was imagination vacationing. Where does Dumbledore go on vacation?
I don't know. I have a feeling that he doesn't really take vacation. I'd imagine he still just kind of hangs around. He has staycations, He
wanders through the herbology rooms.
Because from his wizarding card, right? His chocolate frog wizarding card, we know that he is responsible for going through and finding a lot of these 13 uses of dragon's blood, right? What if he's still searching for that 14th use?
So maybe
that's his off time. This is his research time.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe he's off in like Romania with Charlie.
That's fair. I think that's entirely fair. I like it. I really feel like this is the first time, the only time during the year that we don't see that we can imagine him having some downtime to work on his stuff. Not that he has a full, that's not true at all. He doesn't have a full school load at all. He puts all the other teachers to work overtime.
Yeah, does he teach anything?
Astronomy. No, I don't know. That was our guess early on. But,
I don't think he teaches anything. Maybe he's like those administrators who work year round, but then they can take like their 2-week vacation in January because why not? Because they don't teach. You know what I mean? They're off working in the office and filling out forms and doing really important
I feel like he's more of an emeritus professor than anything. To be honest, he's there to do research. He's there to just kind of protect the place and be a figurehead. He's a mascot too.
Yeah, so. He's a mascot. He should have a big fluffy head. He kind of does though with the beard.
It's true. I do love the scene of him on vacation. It's so funny where Harry's like imagining him in his full robes and everything on the beach, putting sunscreen on his long crooked nose like that. That's just hilarious.
Because that's the only part that needs it. Because everything else is covered by his
right. And Dumbledore seems like a guy that could chill out on the beach. I feel like he could hang out on the beach. His downtime is downtime.
Question 3: what kind of birds are Sirius using, or what kind of birds does Sirius use to deliver his letters?
So I put some real thought into this, and by that I mean I Googled searched tropical birds and just picked 2 that I thought looked cool. I thought about getting into trying to guess where Sirius was and trying to narrow down birds that would be in that locale, but I didn't have a good resource on that, and Google was taking a little more effort to narrow down like that than I wanted to. So if you have a good avian location, geographical based tool, I'd be interested for this chapter that we're recording right now. Outside of that, that'd be cool, I guess. So, what are those books? The bird books, the
Birdwatcher guides?
Yeah, but the name on them, there's a specific one. It's the one that Stan uses in Floats Down Here. It's like Pearson?
Hold on, I'm searching.
Peterson. It's Peterson.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, Peterson Field Guides.
There you go. Good job.
Dad's got one. I saw it on the countertop the other day. True story. I was like, oh, I guess Pennywise is coming for me. Anyway, so in my quick Google search of tropical birds, the two that I picked were the Roseate Spoonbill. So go ahead and Melissa, click that image if you haven't yet.
Did. It's very pink.
Very bright, very pink. I think this is the second one that comes in. It looks pretty large.
With a large wingspan.
Yeah, because it said it could hardly get through the window. Right. This is the one that stood out to me as being that really, really impressive one.
Okay.
The first one, I think, was a black skimmer. Again, pretty fancy, but not completely over the top. Not quite as flamboyant or gaudy for a delivery bird as the other one.
Right.
So
interesting.
Those are my choices.
Nice job.
Thanks.
Question number 4. When writing a letter to Sirius, why doesn't Harry mention his dream?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, he spends the whole chapter figuring out who he should write to talk about this dream with, right? I mean, just basically to get someone's opinion on this. And then he kind of skirts the issue. I don't know if that's he doesn't know how to broach the subject via letter to Sirius Black, who he's only really corresponded with 3 times total at this point. I don't know. That's a good question. What are your thoughts?
Well, it really bothers me because I think Harry has noticed the connection between I dreamed about Voldemort, my scar hurt, right? Like, that comes pretty clear through the chapter. Yet the letter says this. Dear Sirius, thanks for your last letter. That bird was enormous. It could hardly get through my window. Things are the same as usual around here. Dudley's diet isn't going too well. My aunt found him smuggling donuts into his room yesterday. They told him they'd have to cut his pocket money if he keeps doing it. So he got really angry and chucked his PlayStation out of the window. That's a sort of computer thing you can play games on. Bit stupid, really. Now he hasn't even got Mega Mutilation Part 3 to take his mind off things. I'm okay, mainly because the Dursleys are terrified you might turn up and turn them all into bats if I ask you to. A weird thing happened this morning, though. My scar hurt again. Last time that happened, it was because Voldemort was at Hogwarts. But I don't reckon he can be anywhere near me now, can he? Do you know if cursed scars sometimes hurt years afterwards? I'll send this with Hedwig when she gets back. She's off hunting at the moment. Say hello to Buckbeak for me, Harry. No mention of dreaming about Voldemort. No mention about any of that. And yet, to me, that was the important part. It's always bothered me he didn't say anything.
To us, it's the important part. Does he really dwell on the dream that much? Outside of, like, when he first wakes up? And that was, like, a line that I really actually liked a lot, and I highlighted it. Let me see if I can get to it real quick. It's, and who had the old man been? For there had definitely been an old man. Harry watched him fall to the ground. It was all becoming confused. Harry put his face into his hands, blocking out his bedroom, trying to hold on to the picture of that dimly lit room, but it was like trying to keep water in his cupped hands. The details were now trickling away as fast as he tried to hold on to them. Like, and I know that feeling, like you just wake up and you're groggy and you're like, oh, that was like a really cool dream and I was really into it and now I can't get it back. You like that grasping first, like I think it's a great way to describe it too. Like you're trying to hold water in your hands and it's just, you can't help it, but it starts seeping out those memories.
And I'm not saying that I expect him to be able to recount the whole thing.
But the idea of it.
But the idea that I dreamed about Voldemort, I woke up with my scar hurting. The last time my scar hurt, Voldemort was here. I feel like you could have thrown a line in about, I woke up this morning, my scar was hurting. I think my dream was about Voldemort, but the last time it hurt, he was nearby. I dreamed about him, but he can't be near me now. Like, you could have thrown just a little bit in. And I think, I don't know, it's always felt like he was withholding information right there.
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I don't want to make it seem like I thought he completely forgot about having the dream. I don't take it that way at all. I take it as, these specific details got lost, but he remembers having the dream. I don't know that he makes the connection between the dream and the scar necessarily.
You don't think?
I don't know, because he doesn't really dwell on that. Every time he talks about the scar, he goes instantly to that Voldemort being close connection. He doesn't really talk about the dream being an issue at all.
Well, he does say right after the letter, he said there was no point in putting in the dream. He didn't want it to look as though he was too worried. Except that was that was part of it. It's not just that you're scarred. It's that it's the combination. So I'm telling you, it has always struck me as, just
Come on,
unreliable
Harry.
narrator. You know what I mean? We're watching him not divulge all the information to the people who probably need it.
Yeah, but again, like it's a lot more clear to us as to what happened, and he doesn't necessarily remember the specifics on it being a big deal, and he doesn't think that it's a real thing where we saw it happen, kind of thing.
All right.
I don't know.
I still think he's right.
I'm with you. I'm just trying to reason
Stop
through
that.
where he would be.
Let me be right.
You're right, Melissa.
Thank you. I feel better.
You feel vindicated.
Question 5. I do. Just for the moment. Question 5. Do you think it's realistic that Harry conveniently forgets about Sirius until after we have been reintroduced to the entire cast of characters reintroduced, if you will, to those cast of characters from book 4 or book 3?
The joking response?
Sure.
Yeah, completely realistic because this is chapter 2. Like, you have to have that exposition. Like,
do you though?
Well, apparently.
Who's gonna walk into book 4?
Frank
Hey, I'm gonna
Price.
pick up a new book.
Oh, you mean who the readers? So
Yes.
That's actually something I thought of because I knew this was something that we were going to talk about. Like the time where book 4 came out was like full saturation of Harry Potter market, where the first 3 books obviously were out, and there was a lot of publicity for book 4 to be released. Book 3 was still like that was like the first one where it was like, you know, like the late night show up midnight release party thing. Book 4 was like that top level that it ever was for.
I mean,
that,
it was
I
still
feel like.
only 2000. Like I don't remember going. I don't think I went to a midnight release for this book. I know I did for book 5, and so like I know it was a big deal when it came out, but I don't know if the whole series had only been out for 2 or 3 years at this point.
Right, and that's my point. Like this is year 4 basically because they were almost every single year, right? It was 97, 98, 99, and this was 2000, and then it was after that she said this is a little
Break.
Meta Joe data, and she's like, these are doing incredibly well, and I want to write them the way that I want to, and they're going to get a lot longer. So she took her time in between 4 and 5.
Thank goodness she did.
Yes,
although
absolutely.
it was killer to live through.
It absolutely was. And so I feel like that this being the 4th year of them being out, 2 full years of just top of its game, taking the world by storm, I think this is the spot where you might get new readers that just come in for book 4. That's why this one is so blatant. But getting back to your question, is it realistic for Harry to conveniently forget about Sirius? I mean, like I kind of mentioned earlier, they've only truly corresponded. This is the 3rd time. I mean, the 4th time. They had 2 letters earlier on in the summer, and they met each other last year. Harry went from hating this guy to falling in love with this guy, you know, as his godfather in a night, all on June 6th, that one 8-chapter day, calendar day.
My God.
I guess he did get to spend half that day twice, but...
Right. And here's the thing. That was, 5 weeks ago?
Mhm.
So within 5 weeks, I've written to this guy. He's written me back. He sent, you know what I mean? Like, he sent me birds. He sent me. So, like, it's not like just some random person.
But
They've obviously started to develop a relationship.
Yeah, they've got the rapport there. I just think it's still so new for Harry to have anybody in that spot that...
He forgets.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely against his fundamental being to have somebody to go to on that. My kind of rebuttal question here, and I don't quite remember, does he even consider writing to Hagrid?
No.
And who's been that character for him in the past, right? I mean, to me, that's the real curious one. They mention Hagrid, you know, maybe, but I feel like that's maybe next chapter that we get like the full redescription of Hagrid. But like to me, that's surprising that he doesn't consider writing to Hagrid. That would be great, or Lupin. He might not know how to find Lupin, but he knows where Hagrid's at.
True.
And we know that he trusts Hedwig to be able to find him. But either way, both of those would be really good. We could have used more exposition here, I know, but really good options for Harry. Really good options for Harry as well.
Right. All right. I think that wraps up my questions.
All right. So let's get into some chapter superlatives. Melissa, what was your favorite line?
Speaking of the Dursleys, but their attitude had changed since they had found out that Harry had a dangerous murderer for a godfather, for Harry had conveniently forgotten to tell them that Sirius was innocent. Well played, Harry.
Yeah.
Well
Let's
played.
hold on to that information.
It's a need-to-know basis.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Very, very smart.
Yeah, well played.
My line a little bit goes along with that. It's around the same portion of the chapter, and it starts with, "Asleep was the way Harry liked the Dursleys best. It wasn't as though they were ever any help to him awake."
That's so good.
That wraps it all up. Like, that's, include a little bit more abuse talk, but that's everything that the Dursleys are.
So, I'm going to sound like a terrible mommy for a second. That phase when your kids are like 18 months to 3 and they are just exhausting constantly and dumping everything and tearing up everything and never stopping and always like you can't talk to them about anything. They're constantly going. And then they fall asleep and they're like the most adorable people ever. You're like,
I know that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like I love my kids so much, but that toddlery phase of I don't know how I'm going to survive this day, and then they fall asleep. You're right. You're cute. That's what that.
Thank God you're cute.
Right. Oh man.
Yeah. So look forward to that, future parents. It's fun. It really is. It's worth it.
It really is. Totally worth getting through.
Yeah. So Melissa, who was your chapter MVP?
Okay, so I really had to think about this one.
I love your answer.
Again, as we like. This is an exposition chapter. We saw Harry, and then a little more Harry. And everybody else who was mentioned was really just sort of figments of Harry's imagination, right?
It was truly just the top level descriptions of who they were. There wasn't like anything new or interesting necessarily.
No, there was nothing. So I went with a characterization imagination on Harry's part. And my favorite, my chapter imagination MVP was vacationing Dumbledore on the beach in his robes and his sunscreen.
I like how you're really staying imaginary with that answer. I really appreciate it because
you're welcome.
I love that scene. It's one that always stuck with me. Like I could just see him in a, I know he thinks about him in his full robes, but I can see him in like a Tommy Bahama shirt with like some shades, like those pictures you see of like Santa Claus at Christmas or in summertime. Like
yes,
that's what I view Dumbledore as. Like with flip flops and beach shorts, snorkel, maybe like a flamingo floaty tubey around his waist. I can see it, man.
I'm with you. Sounds good. How about you?
My honorable mention here was for the only other actual characters that were kind of involved in this chapter. Besides Hedwig, I want to go with the tropical birds.
Slow clap for them.
Roseate Spoonbill and the black skimmer. Those are canon now to me.
Yeah, I think I have no comment. Let's just move on.
I think that wraps us up.
That's
about it.
Which means we're going to go away now.
We're going away now.
So you have some homework. We need a fanfic on the life of Voldemort 1945 through 1970.
In the purview of chapter 2 of Goblet of Fire to this point.
Yes. And I'm going to need you to research some birds to make sure that Luke's birds are accurate for the birds that
the potential areas that Sirius could be, which is almost anywhere. So
if you could tweet those at us, that would be great at Not Named Podcast.
Send us your birds.
Aw, because they're going to tweet at us.
Some of those digital owls.
We're really bad now. Okay, so you could also email us at thepodcastthat@gmail.com. Please check out our website, thepodcastthat.com, where we have our Quibbler, our very own blog that is being written for us. So check that out along with things from all of our other shows.
Check out the podcastthat.com/support us page for all the different ways you can help support our shows, including our Patreon links, our TeePublic links. We have some t-shirts up there. I just bought a few shirts and stickers today, so hopefully I can start giving some stickers away to you fine folks out there. Subscribe, like, rate, leave comments on iTunes and YouTube. That all really helps us get more exposure to more cool, wonderful, imaginary listeners like you, and we appreciate it.
Join us next week when we start talking about chapter number 3.
The Invitation. Stay imaginary.
Thanks.